The first thing Samuel noticed was the sound. Not the usual loud noise of Kampala's market streets, the boda-boda engines revving, the traders shouting across stalls, the generators coughing black smoke. This sound was different. It was deep, smooth, and heavy, like thunder that did not fall from the sky, but rolled slowly along the ground. Samuel stopped with a spoon halfway to Amara's lips. Amara was sitting weakly on the old wooden bench just inside his small roadside repair shop, under a cracked iron canopy that rattled whenever the wind passed. Her back rested against a thick wooden pillar. Her eyes were barely open. Her lips were slightly parted, waiting for the next spoonful of rice and groundnut stew. Samuel's hands were trembling as he fed her. Not because he was afraid of hard work. Samuel had repaired motorcycles under heavy rain, blazing afternoon sun, and once even during a roadside fire. He was trembling because Amara looked like someone whose body had already decided to leave this world, and he was the only one still arguing with that decision. "Slow now," Samuel whispered, his voice low and steady, like an older brother speaking to a frightened child. "Just take this one bite. It will give you strength." Amara swallowed with great effort. Her throat worked slowly. Her eyes blinked, dim and tired, but still holding a small flicker of life. Samuel kept the smile on his face, even though a heavy pain sat in his chest. That was exactly when the convoy appeared. Black Mercedes SUVs. Not one, not two, but a long line of them rolling down the dusty road like a slow-moving wall of wealth. Their windows were darkened. Their bodies gleamed like polished mirrors under the afternoon sun. The repair shop suddenly felt tiny, exposed and forgotten, like a cracked matchbox sitting beside a palace. The cars stopped close together, forming a barrier of metal and power. Men stepped out first. Tall men, security detail, black uniforms, earpieces, expressionless faces. They moved like soldiers trained for silence. They fanned out fast, eyes scanning rooftops, checking side alleys, sweeping corners, as though trouble was expected to burst out of Samuel's pile of discarded motorcycle parts at any moment. Samuel's spoon froze in the air again. His mouth opened, but no words came. His mind searched desperately for any reason that men like these would stop at a poor roadside repair shop. He had never seen anything like it in his entire life. The nearest guard looked at Samuel the way you look at something that has fallen on the road and needs to be moved aside. Samuel's stomach tightened. Then the front Mercedes door opened, slowly, deliberately, like a page turning in a powerful book. A polished, dark shoe touched the dusty red ground. Then another, and a man stepped out fully. He was tall, broad-shouldered, sharp in every way. He wore a charcoal gray suit with a crisp white shirt underneath. His close-trimmed silver beard framed a face that looked like it had appeared on national television many times. Controlled, serious, powerful. Even without anyone speaking his name, you could feel that this man had authority the way a mountain has weight. The air around the workshop changed. The whole street seemed to hold its breath. A nearby market woman stopped calling out her prices. A child stopped running mid-step. Even the wind seemed to pause out of respect. The man looked slowly. His eyes found Samuel's workshop. Then he began walking towards it, each step calm and deliberate, like a man who had already decided what he was going to do. Samuel's heart beat faster and faster. His thoughts raced. Did I break the law? Was it that customer's motorcycle last week? Is this police? Is this government? But the man did not look like police. He looked like the kind of man that police stood straighter for. Samuel rose quickly, nearly dropping the plate of food. He wiped his hands on his stained work overalls, even though it did no good. His fingers were still dark with grease and old oil. The man came closer, and Samuel noticed something completely unexpected. The man's face was not angry, it was in pain. The kind of deep, silent pain that a father carries when he does not know where his child is and cannot sleep because of it. Samuel swallowed hard. Amara shifted slightly on the bench behind him. She was weak, but the rumbling noise of the convoy had reached her ears. Her head lifted just a small amount. Her eyes tried to find focus on something in front of her. The man stepped into the shadow of the workshop canopy. The red dust stuck to the bottom of his expensive trousers, but he did not look down at it. He glanced once at Samuel, then his eyes moved past him and locked completely and totally onto Amara. Samuel's breathing stopped. His whole body jerked as if something had struck him from the inside. He stood frozen for one long, stretched second. Then he moved. Not slowly, not carefully. He moved like a man who had been running through a dark nightmare and finally found what he was searching for. Samuel stumbled back in surprise. "Sir," Samuel started, but the man did not hear him. The man dropped directly to his knees on the dirt floor of the workshop, his expensive suit pressed into the red dust without hesitation. His knee landed in the gritty ground, and the powerful man, this man who looked like he could purchase half of Kampala, began to cry. Real, unstoppable tears. They fell from his eyes and dropped onto the dust like the first drops of a long-held storm. His lips trembled. His large hands reached towards Amara with careful gentleness, as if she might dissolve if he breathed too hard. "My child," the man whispered in a voice completely broken. "Amara." Samuel's entire world stopped turning. Amara's eyes opened wider than they had in days. She struggled to lift her arm. The man held her with such tenderness, with such desperate relief, pulling her carefully into his arms like she was the last remaining piece of his heart. Amara's head rested against his chest. Even in her deep weakness, she held him back faintly, as though her body had recognized him long before her mind could follow. Samuel stood completely still. His ears were ringing. His mouth was dry as dust. The man looked up at Samuel, with tears still running freely down his face. When he finally spoke, his voice shook, but it carried enough weight to fill the entire road. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for keeping my daughter alive." Samuel's hands went loose. The plate of food nearly fell to the floor. His mind repeated the words over and over. Daughter, my daughter. In that single moment, Samuel understood something that made his knees buckle. The dying girl he had found and fed every single day was not simply a stranger. She was someone's beloved child, someone with power, someone with enough wealth to send an entire convoy of vehicles to a dusty roadside repair shop. Samuel's lips moved without sound. Then the man said his name, and the ground under Samuel seemed to shift beneath him. "I am Chairman Karimi," the man said quietly, as if the name needed no further explanation. "And Amara is my only child. She has been missing for weeks." Samuel's head spun. Chairman Karimi, that Chairman Karimi, the industrialist discussed on every news station, the man whose business interests stretched across 5 countries, the man whose name appeared in newspapers even when he tried to stay out of them. Samuel's vision blurred for a moment. He grabbed the edge of the old wooden bench just to stay upright. Amara blinked slowly from her father's arms. Her face was still pale, her lips were dry, but her eyes held just a little more life than they had in days. Chairman Karimi wiped his tears with the back of his hand, but new ones kept coming. He held Amara as though releasing her would bring the very worst back. Then the head of the security team stepped forward and spoke in a low, urgent voice. "Sir, we need to move her now. A clinic is prepared and waiting." Chairman Karimi nodded quickly, his grief shifting into immediate action.
He looked back at Samuel. His face carried deep gratitude and something else beneath it, something complicated, like a question that had not yet been shaped into words. "Please," he said gently, still kneeling in the dust, "tell me, where exactly did you find her?"
Samuel opened his mouth, but before he could answer, Amara suddenly coughed, a deep, rattling cough that shook her whole body. Her eyes rolled slightly. Her head dropped limp against her father's arm. Chairman Karimi's face changed in one single instant from grateful to terrified. "Amara!" he shouted. The guards moved immediately, rushing forward with practiced speed. Samuel's plate finally dropped completely, spilling rice and stew across the dusty floor. He rushed forward too, panic rising like hot water in his throat, because the girl he had fought so hard to keep alive was collapsing again, right inside his poor workshop, right in front of her powerful father. And this time, Samuel could not say with any certainty that she would open her eyes again. Amara's body went completely limp in Chairman Karimi's arms. Her eyes closed fully, while the guards shouted and cleared space around them. Samuel stood there shaking, staring at the girl he had been feeding every single day, asking himself the question that had no easy answer. Was she about to die here? Right now, after her father had finally come to find her? "Move back! Give space!" The command cracked through the air like a whip. Samuel stumbled backward as the guards surrounded Amara. One of them moved Samuel aside with a firm but careful hand, while another pulled a small emergency kit from the nearest vehicle. Samuel's heart hammered without stopping as he watched Chairman Karimi hold Amara tighter. Her body was frighteningly light, her head tilted sideways. Her lips were turning paler by the second. "Amara, please," Chairman Karimi whispered, his voice completely unraveling now. "Your father is here. Open your eyes, please." But Amara did not respond. She did not move. Samuel's legs threatened to give way beneath him. He had seen many sick people before. He had seen road accidents, bad injuries, and bleeding wounds brought to his workshop because proper medical help was too far away. But this was entirely different. This girl had been fading slowly for days, and Samuel had been pushing back against death with nothing except food, clean water, and consistent care. Now, death was pushing back harder than he could hold. "Sir, she is extremely weak," one guard reported quickly after checking Amara's pulse. "We must leave immediately." Chairman Karimi nodded sharply. "Go now. Take her now." The men lifted Amara carefully and carried her toward the vehicle. Chairman Karimi stayed right beside her, his eyes never leaving her face, not even for a single moment. Samuel stood there with nothing in his hands, feeling completely helpless. His heart screamed to follow them, but his body would not move. He had fed her every day, he had sat with her through every long night, he had listened to her broken breathing in the dark. Now she was being carried away, and he did not know whether he would ever see her again. Then Chairman Karimi stopped. He turned sharply. His steady eyes found Samuel standing alone in the middle of the dusty workshop. "You," he said with firm certainty, "come with us." Samuel flinched. "Sir," Samuel began. "Come with us," Chairman Karimi said again. "You know her condition. You know what she has been through. I need you with us." Before Samuel could even form a response, a guard took his arm, not roughly, but with clear urgency, and guided him toward the convoy. Samuel looked back once at his small repair shop, the worn tools, the broken motorcycles waiting for repair, the old wooden bench, everything he owned in this world. Then the heavy vehicle door closed behind him, and the convoy moved at speed. The private clinic was bright, spotlessly clean, and completely silent in a way that made Samuel feel deeply out of place in his grease-stained work clothes. Doctors moved with quick efficiency, Machines beeped in steady rhythms. Amara was taken through a door Samuel was not permitted to enter. Chairman Karimi stood outside it, pacing back and forth, no longer the commanding businessman from the roadside. Now he was simply a father, walking, pacing, rubbing both hands together, speaking quiet prayers under his breath. Samuel sat on a metal chair near the wall, his back curved, his head dropped. His mind kept returning to the same night. He was reliving the moment he found Amara. It had been late evening several days ago. A heavy rain had just passed and left the air thick and still. Samuel was locking up his shop when he heard a soft sound coming from behind the stacked tires near the back wall, a weak, broken sound. He thought at first it was a small animal in pain, but something in him made him look again more carefully, and that was when he saw her. Amara, collapsed near the roadside ditch. Her clothes were torn and soiled, her skin was cold and clammy, her eyes were barely cracked open. She looked like someone who had walked until she had absolutely nothing left, and then simply dropped where she stood. Samuel had hesitated, not because he lacked compassion. He hesitated because Kampala at night was not always forgiving. Helping strangers in the wrong situation had brought good, innocent people serious trouble before. Police suspicion, false accusations, dangerous enemies. But then, Amara had whispered a single word: water. And Samuel knew with absolute certainty that he could not walk away from that. A door swung open. Samuel jumped to his feet immediately. Chairman Karimi stopped pacing. A doctor walked out, peeling off his gloves. "How is she?" Chairman Karimi asked, his voice stretched tight. The doctor exhaled slowly. "She is stable for the moment, severely dehydrated and critically weak. She has gone without proper care and nutrition for a long time, but she is a fighter." Chairman Karimi closed his eyes. When he opened them, fresh tears were already running. "Thank you, God," he whispered.
Samuel felt the tightness in his own chest ease slightly. "She will need significant rest," the doctor continued. "We will monitor her closely for several hours before she can be safely taken home." "Whatever she needs," Chairman Karimi said immediately. "Nothing is a problem." The doctor then turned quietly to Samuel. "And you," he said in a calm voice, "you did the right thing. If she had remained one more day without food and proper care, she would almost certainly not have survived." Samuel stood very still. He did not know whether to feel proud or afraid. 3 hours later, Amara lay on a hospital bed. Her face looked cleaner, softer. The sharp edges of suffering had smoothed out just a little. Her breathing was steady and even. Chairman Karimi sat beside her, holding both her hands in his. Samuel stood near the doorway, uncertain whether he truly belonged in that clean and quiet room. Then Amara's eyes opened slowly. She blinked twice, and she saw her father. "Dad," she breathed. Chairman Karimi leaned forward at once. "I am right here. I am right here, my child." Her eyes drifted slowly across the room and found Samuel standing by the door. A weak but very real smile crossed her lips. "Thank you," she whispered to him. Samuel could only nod. He could not find the words. That night, Chairman Karimi took Amara home with a full medical team traveling alongside them. But Samuel did not sleep. He lay on his thin mattress in the small back room of his workshop, staring up at the ceiling while his mind ran in circles. Chairman Karimi, a missing daughter, a private clinic, a long convoy of vehicles. None of it felt real. He began to wonder if trouble would follow. He wondered if he would be called in for questioning, accused of something, blamed for things he knew nothing about. In Kampala, kindness did not always come without consequences. The next morning, Samuel was underneath the motorcycle, tightening a stubborn bolt when the sound returned.
Deep, smooth, powerful engines rolling from a distance. Samuel froze where he lay. Then he crawled out slowly. The convoy was back. Same black vehicles, same dust rising around them, same workshop. But this time, people had gathered. Neighbors came out to look. Vendors left their carts. Children pointed from across the road. Word had spread through the street overnight. Samuel wiped his hands and stood up straight. Chairman Karimi stepped out first, and this time, Amara came with him. She wore a simple but elegant outfit. Her hair was neatly arranged. Her face was still pale, but her eyes held real light in them again. She walked carefully but steadily, and she came straight toward Samuel without hesitation. Before Samuel could say a single word, Amara knelt on the dusty ground right in front of him. Samuel panicked immediately. "No, please," he said. "Please stand up." But she bowed her head and spoke clearly, without shame, so that everyone nearby could hear. "Thank you," she said. "You saved my life." The crowd went completely silent. Samuel's eyes went wide. Chairman Karimi stepped forward and addressed the gathered people with a raised voice. "This man fed my daughter every single day when she could not care for herself," he said. "He never stopped. He never gave up on her." Samuel's chest tightened so much he could hardly draw breath. Chairman Karimi raised his voice further so that every person standing on that street could hear every word. "I give you all my word today," he declared. "I will build the finest, most modern automotive workshop in all of Kampala for this man, free of charge, fully equipped, his name above the door." The crowd erupted with noise. Samuel's knees weakened, the street spun around him, and just as he was trying to hold himself together, Chairman Karimi added one more thing, quietly, looking directly into Samuel's eyes. "But first," he said with great seriousness, "I need you to tell me everything, everything that happened to Amara from the very first moment you found her." Chairman Karimi's face had gone very still. The warmth was still present, but beneath it was something harder, the look of a man who was accustomed to uncovering difficult truths and acting on them without delay. "Speak," Chairman Karimi said. "Take all the time you need." Samuel swallowed. His hands would not stop trembling. "I found her at night," he began slowly. "It was behind those stacked tires." He pointed toward the back of the workshop. Amara listened from beside her father, seated in a chair a guard had brought. Her hands rested folded in her lap. Her eyes stayed on Samuel, quiet and steady. She was completely alone, very weak. She could barely speak. She asked for water. I wanted to take her to a hospital immediately, but she could not stand on her own feet, and I have no vehicle of my own. So I brought her inside my workshop and laid her on the bench. Chairman Karimi nodded slowly. "I fed her," Samuel continued, "small amounts, rice, water, bean soup on the days I could manage it. Some days she could not eat at all. Some nights she cried while she was sleeping, without ever waking." Amara pressed her lips tightly together. Chairman Karimi's jaw hardened. "She told me she had escaped," Samuel continued. "She said men had been holding her somewhere. She did not know where she'd been kept. She had lost all track of time." At those words, Chairman Karimi rose to his feet sharply. The guards stiffened immediately around them. Amara flinched just slightly. "Men?" Chairman Karimi asked, his voice suddenly cold. "Which men?" Samuel hesitated. "I do not know who they were, sir. She did not say names. She only told me that they left her near the road when she became too sick for them."
Chairman Karimi closed his eyes for a long count of silence. When he opened them, something had changed in them permanently. He turned to his head of security and spoke in a very low voice. "We will speak tonight about this." The guard gave one firm nod in acknowledgement. Amara reached out and placed her hand gently on her father's arm. "Dad, please," she whispered softly. "I'm safe now. That is what matters." Chairman Karimi looked down at her, and the cold, burning anger in his eyes softened into something much more tender. 3 months passed. The small, cracked roadside repair shop was gone without a trace. In its place stood something that Kampala had genuinely never seen before on that street. A large, modern automotive workshop complex. Brilliant lighting, smooth, clean floors, state-of-the-art equipment, multiple service bays, glass-fronted offices, and a sign so large and bright that people stopped their cars and motorcycles just to stand beneath it and read it properly. Samuel stood at the very center of all of it, wearing a fresh, clean overall, looking like a man standing inside a dream he had never once dared to dream for himself. Dozens of trained mechanics moved around him with calm efficiency. Cars lined up for service outside. Private vehicles, company fleets, government cars, and every single person on the premises called him Boss Samuel. Samuel had tried to refuse the whole thing at first, but Chairman Karimi had been firm and completely clear. "This is not a reward," he had said plainly. "This is justice that was long overdue." Within 1 year, Samuel's entire life changed at a speed his mind struggled to process. He became known across the city, respected, financially secure for the first time in his life. He moved from his back-room mattress into a proper home. He purchased a vehicle of his own. He employed more than 80 mechanics and apprentices. He wore clean clothes every single day. And yet, every single time he saw Amara, something in his chest did something it had absolutely no business doing. Amara began coming to the workshop regularly, at first only to say thank you one more time, then to sit and talk. She asked questions about engines, about Samuel's early life, about how he had learned to keep going when everything around him was hard. Samuel tried to keep a careful distance between them. She was a chairman's daughter. He was a mechanic who once survived on dry bread and weak tea.
But life was simply not interested in that distance. Samuel's workshop was contracted to maintain all Chairman Karimi's personal vehicles and his entire company fleet, so meetings happened regularly. Meetings became long conversations. Conversations stretched longer than they needed to. Laughter entered the space between them. Then those particular silences arrived, the kind that carry far more meaning than words ever could. One evening, as the last light faded behind the workshop rooftop, Amara stood beside Samuel, watching the mechanics finish for the day and pack up their tools. "You gave me a second life," she said quietly. "Before you fed me, I had completely stopped trying. I had accepted that it was the end of my story." Samuel kept his eyes on the workers. "I only did what any decent person should do," he said. She smiled with a trace of sadness in it. "Not everyone does." Their hands brushed against each other where they both rested on the railing. Neither one moved away. Chairman Karimi noticed everything. He said nothing for a very long time. Then, one quiet evening, he called Samuel into his private office. The room was large, still, and dignified in every detail. "Do you love my daughter?" Chairman Karimi asked, without any introduction whatsoever. Samuel's heart nearly stopped completely. "I deeply respect her, sir," he said. "That is not the question I asked you," Chairman Karimi said evenly. Samuel breathed in slowly. "Yes," Samuel said at last, "I do love her." Chairman Karimi studied him for a long, unhurried time. Then he gave one slow nod. "If you ever cause her pain," he said calmly and without any drama, "you will answer to me directly." Samuel bowed his head low. "I understand completely, sir. I give you my word." Some months later, Kampala had only one conversation, the wedding of Chairman Karimi's only daughter. The day he placed Amara's hand into Samuel's. Cameras flashed everywhere. The city spoke of nothing else for days.
But just as the vows were about to be spoken, a man stepped forward from somewhere within the crowd. His voice was loud and sharp, cutting across the music and the celebration. "This wedding should not take place," he called out. "That mechanic is hiding something very important from all of you." The hall exploded into noise. Samuel's heart dropped like a heavy stone. Amara turned to him with wide, confused eyes. Chairman Karimi became absolutely still. The stranger raised a piece of paper high above his head. "This document," he said loudly, "will completely destroy what you all believe you know about this man you are celebrating today." There, in front of the entire wedding gathering, a stranger stood accusing Samuel of concealing a dark secret from his past and claiming to hold the proof in his hands. Samuel stood frozen where he was. He knew that one truth from long ago could tear apart every single thing he had worked so hard to build. The wedding hall descended into chaos.
Gasps tore through the crowd. Guests rose from their seats. Phones appeared in many hands at once. Whispers ran through the hall like fire moving through dry grass. Samuel felt the color drain from his face completely. Amara stepped close to him. Her eyes searched his face with care, not with anger, with fear. Fear of losing him. "What is he saying?" she whispered. Samuel could not respond, because the man standing there holding that paper, Samuel recognized him, not by his name, by memory, a painful, buried memory that Samuel had believed the years had sealed over forever. Chairman Karimi raised one hand slowly and steadily. The entire hall fell quiet, not because they desired silence, but because they feared what his silence might mean. "Who are you?" Chairman Karimi asked, with measured calm. The man walked forward. He appeared to be in his late 40s. His clothing was plain compared to the guests around him, but his eyes held a sharpness and an old, grinding bitterness. "My name is Peter," the man announced, "and I know this man very well indeed." Samuel's throat closed tight. Peter lifted the document even higher. "This man you are about to trust with your daughter," he said, pointing directly at Samuel, "was once arrested in this very city." A large gasp echoed through every corner of the hall. Amara shook her head sharply. "That is not true." Peter smiled thinly and without warmth. "Is it not?" Every pair of eyes in the room moved to Samuel. His legs felt as though they had turned to stone. Chairman Karimi's face became impossible to read. "Samuel," he said quietly, with great deliberateness, "look at me." Samuel forced his eyes upward to meet him. "Tell me the truth," Chairman Karimi said. "Is there anything real in what this man is claiming?" The hall felt like it had contracted to the size of that single question. Samuel opened his mouth. He closed it. He gathered every piece of himself, and then he spoke. "Yes," he said. The single word landed in the room like something heavy dropped onto stone. Amara took a step back. "What?" she breathed. "I was arrested once," Samuel said, his voice unsteady but clear. "Many years ago." The hall erupted again with noise and shock. Amara's eyes filled with tears immediately. "Why did you not tell me?" she asked. Her voice broke on the words. Samuel turned fully to face her. "Because I carried shame about it," he said quietly, "and because the truth of what happened is not what anyone will imagine when they hear only the word arrested." Peter laughed sharply. "Listen to him," he mocked. "Always the innocent one." Chairman Karimi raised his hand. "Explain," he ordered simply. Samuel took a long, steadying breath. His mind traveled all the way back to a time he had spent years trying to leave behind. Long before the repair shop, long before the dust and the grease, long before Amara. Samuel was young, desperate, and hungry. He worked as a helper in another man's garage on the other side of the city. One night, armed robbers broke in. Vehicles were taken. Parts disappeared. The police arrived while Samuel was still on the premises. He was poor.
He had no connections, no lawyer, no one with influence to speak for him. They said I helped the robbers, Samuel said, his eyes growing wet at the edges. But I did not. I was sleeping at the back of the workshop that night because I had nowhere else to sleep. I had no home of my own. Peter interrupted loudly. All of that is lies. Samuel did not look at him.
I spent 3 weeks in a cell, Samuel continued. 3 weeks of hunger and fear until the real thieves were caught while trying to sell the stolen vehicles across the border. My name was completely cleared. All charges were dropped and withdrawn. He looked directly at Amara. I was innocent. I have always been innocent. Amara's tears ran down her face openly and freely. Peter waved the document again in the air. "This paper shows he was arrested," he shouted. "That fact alone is enough." Chairman Karimi stepped forward with full authority in every movement of his body. "Give that paper to me, now." Peter hesitated. A guard moved forward and took the document from him firmly. Chairman Karimi read through it carefully and slowly. Then he looked up. "This document shows an arrest," he said clearly. To the entire hall, "It also shows a full release, case dismissed, all charges completely withdrawn." The thin satisfaction on Peter's face began to crack apart. But Chairman Karimi was not finished. "Why are you here today?" he asked very quietly. The quietness made the question more powerful, not less. Peter's face twisted with old anger. "Because that workshop," he snapped, "the one that Samuel now runs and made famous, it used to belong to my brother. He worked that corner of the road for 10 years. When Samuel became well known across the city, every customer left. Business dried up. My brother lost everything he had worked for and built with his own hands." Samuel frowned deeply. "I never took anything from your brother. I built my workshop from an empty piece of land, from nothing." "You ruined him," Peter snapped back. Chairman Karimi's expression narrowed completely. "So this is not about justice at all," he said quietly. "This is about old jealousy wearing new clothes." Peter stepped back slightly. Amara wiped her tears away and walked straight towards Samuel without hesitation. Her hands trembled slightly as she held his face in her palms. "You saved me," she said, softly, clearly, and without any doubt in her voice. "I know exactly who you are." Samuel broke. Tears ran down his face freely and without shame. But just as the air in the room began to settle and the fear started to ease, another voice spoke, cold, controlled, completely unexpected. "This wedding is not yet safe." Everyone in the hall turned toward the sound. A woman was stepping forward through the seated guests. She was composed and well-dressed, with sharp eyes that took in the entire room in one quick glance. "I am Detective Obuya," she said evenly and without hurry, "and there is one more matter that every person in this hall needs to hear before this ceremony continues." Chairman Karimi's face went tight. "What matter?" he asked. Detective Obuya looked at Samuel directly and without blinking. "The individuals who abducted Amara," she said, "have still not been apprehended." Silence dropped over the hall like a heavy curtain, and she added, carefully, deliberately, one word at a time, "We have confirmed information that at least one person who was connected to them is present somewhere in this building today." Amara's hand slipped away from Samuel's face. Detective Obuya raised her hands slowly, and she pointed. She pointed directly at Samuel. As the detective's accusation hung in the air, pointing at the man who had saved Amara's life, the entire wedding hall turned to cold horror. Amara stepped back from Samuel in visible shock. Chairman Karimi's eyes went completely dark.
because Samuel was no longer only defending his past, he was now fighting for his very freedom. The hall had stopped breathing entirely. Detective Obuya's finger remained raised and pointed. The music had died. The smiles had vanished. Every trace of celebration had drained away like water into cracked and dry ground. Amara's hand had fallen completely from Samuel's. Her eyes searched his face, without anger, but with a deep and desperate fear. Fear of losing him, fear of losing the truth, fear of the world she had clawed her way back to life in, suddenly crumbling apart again. "Samuel?" she whispered, her voice barely holding itself together. "Tell me she is wrong." Samuel opened his mouth. For a long, terrible moment, nothing came out. Every memory crashed into him at the same time. The cell, the hunger, the nights sleeping on a cold floor. The evening he found Amara barely drawing breath behind his stacked tires. "I swear on my life," Samuel finally said, his voice loud and shaking at the same time, "I had absolutely nothing to do with any person who harmed her. I would give my own life before I allowed anyone to hurt Amara." Detective Obuya raised her palm calmly. She spoke firmly. "No one has pronounced him guilty. This is not a trial being conducted in this hall." Chairman Karimi stepped forward. His face was unreadable. "You have pointed at the man who kept my daughter breathing," he said slowly. "You will explain every single word you just said." Detective Obuya gave a firm nod. "When Amara was taken," she began, "we tracked the group responsible. These were experienced, organized individuals. They had operated before and left very little evidence behind." Amara shivered where she stood. "They moved her between locations frequently," the detective continued. "They made ransom demands and several contact attempts with the family. But then something went wrong during the captivity." The hall was absolutely silent. "Amara became very ill," Detective Obuya said plainly. "She stopped eating. She stopped responding to any of them at all." The group panicked. Amara closed her eyes slowly. Fragments of memory rushed back without warning. Dark rooms with no windows, rough hands, angry, frightened voices arguing in the dark. "They discussed ending it," the detective said quietly. "They concluded she was no longer of any value to them alive." A gasp tore through the entire hall. Amara's knees softened beneath her, but Chairman Karimi moved immediately and placed steadying hands from her behind. Detective Obuya breathed in carefully before continuing, but one man among them objected strongly. Samuel's head came up sharply. "One man?" Chairman Karimi repeated. "Yes," the detective said, "a poor man. Someone they had crossed paths with years before, someone who had once worked in the same garage where they had stored stolen vehicles long ago." Voices moved quietly through the crowd. Detective Obuya's eyes settled on Samuel again, not pointing this time, searching. "That man," she said, "was known among that group as the stubborn one, the one who refused payment from dirty hands, the one who spoke out against them even when it cost him very heavily." Samuel's heart struck hard against his ribs. "They remembered him well," the detective continued. "That same man who once stood up against them paid for it with 3 wrongful weeks in a cell." Peter's face had gone completely pale. "They remembered something that man had said during an argument with them years before," the detective continued. She paused, letting the hall stay in the silence. "He had said, 'Even a life that has almost nothing left is still a life worth keeping.'" The hall inhaled together as one. Amara's eyes filled completely with tears. "So, instead of making the worst possible choice," the fit detective finished, "they made a different one. They drove her far from where they were hiding, and they left her near a roadside, still breathing, still alive. Chairman Karimi covered his mouth with his hand. Amara pressed both palms over her lips, crying openly now without restraint. Detective Obuya turned and faced Samuel completely. "That man," she said with full clarity and without any hesitation, "your character saved her life. Not once, twice."
The room broke entirely apart into sound. People wept openly without embarrassment. Many clapped. Prayers were spoken by those standing nearby. Amara pulled away from her father and ran to Samuel and held on to him with her entire strength. "I knew it," she said through her tears against his chest. "I knew in my heart you were not capable of harming anyone." Samuel held her tightly. He was shaking from head to foot. His own tears soaked into her veil. "I was terrified," he whispered. "I was afraid that things from my past would destroy your future before it could even begin." Chairman Karimi stepped toward them both. His eyes were wet. He stood still for a long moment, saying nothing. Then he did something that shocked everyone gathered in that hall. He bowed his head slowly and deliberately toward Samuel. "Forgive me," Chairman Karimi said quietly. "For every single moment I doubted the man who fed my child when I could not find her." Samuel went completely still. "Sir?" he started. Chairman Karimi raised his hand to stop him gently. "You are not simply marrying my daughter," he said. "You are becoming part of this family, from this day forward." Detective Obuya had already turned sharply. Peter was attempting to ease quietly toward the back of the hall and disappear through the crowd. "Stop right there," Peter's voice cracked. "I only wanted people to know the truth," he said weakly. Detective Obuya's expression was completely flat. "You wanted revenge for a loss that was never Samuel's fault or responsibility." She nodded to the guards at the door. Peter was taken from the hall immediately. "You will face formal charges for making false public accusations and deliberately disrupting a legal civil proceeding," she said, without raising her voice above its usual level. Peter shouted as he was removed, his words falling apart into meaningless noise. The hall began to settle again. The priest cleared his throat and looked out at the gathered guests. His voice was thick with emotion when he finally spoke. "Shall we continue?" Amara laughed through her tears, a full, real, beautiful laugh. "Yes, please, yes." The wedding continued, but it was not the same wedding it had been before the interruption. The joy was now deeper and more honest. When Chairman Karimi walked Amara down the aisle a second time, his steps carried a steadier and prouder quality. At the altar, he placed Amara's hand carefully into Samuel and spoke quietly just between the three of them. "You gave her food when she was dying," he said. "Now, give her a lifetime of love and peace." Samuel nodded. Tears blurred everything in his sight. "I will," he promised. "I will, every day." The vows were spoken. Simple words, honest words that had been earned by everything that came before them. When they were declared husband and wife, the celebration that erupted in that hall was louder than anything its walls had ever held before. Life after the wedding did not slow down or become quiet. If anything, it grew fuller with each passing month. Samuel's workshop expanded again and again, its reputation spreading far beyond Kampala and into surrounding regions. Young mechanics traveled from distant towns, hoping to train under the man whose story had become something people told each other at roadside stalls and in the evenings. But Samuel did not change in the ways that mattered most. Every single morning, he still arrived first at the workshop, still wore his work overalls, still spoke to every apprentice as though their progress and growth were personally important to him. Amara joined him regularly, not as the chairman's daughter, but as his wife.
One afternoon, she found the original wooden bench that Samuel had kept stored carefully behind the new workshop. It had been saved without explanation. "This is where I sat," she said quietly, running her hand along the worn, familiar wood. Samuel stood beside her. "And this is where I understood what I was truly made of," he replied. Together they began something new. Every Friday, cooked food was prepared and distributed to roadside workers, to street children, to small clinics and shelters around the city. Amara insisted on going every single time, without exception. She served every plate with her own hands. When people thanked her, she smiled and said the same words each time. "Someone once fed me when I could no longer stand on my own, and because of that, I am here." One evening, as the last warm daylight faded slowly behind the workshop, Amara rested her head against Samuel's shoulder. "Do you know what truly saved me?" she asked in a quiet voice. Samuel thought for a moment. "The food?" he offered gently. She shook her head. "Not only the food," she said. "What saved me was the kindness that chose to keep going, even when it had every reason to stop, even when nobody was watching, even when there was nothing to gain." Samuel looked around him, the new machines, the apprentices packing up tools and calling out goodbyes to each other, the entire life that had grown quietly from one small choice made in the dark on a rainy evening in Kampala. He remembered the night he found Mara leaning against that wooden pillar with almost nothing left, the spoon shaking in his hand, the fear sitting in his chest, the quiet, ordinary decision to stay and keep going. Sometimes the greatest changes in this world are not made by the most powerful people. Sometimes they are made by an ordinary person with nothing in their hands except a willingness to care, who keeps feeding someone even when the whole world is not watching and never expects anything in return. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment and subscribe to Fusion Narratives for more powerful stories about ordinary people who did extraordinary things.